Most security awareness training is boring, forgettable, and let's be honest, a bit pointless. But it doesn't have to be. In this episode of the Awareness Angle interviews, I sat down with Harley Sugarman from Anagram Security to talk about what actually works when it comes to changing behaviour, why most awareness metrics are nonsense, and how to make people genuinely care about security. We dig into AI, phishing fatigue, and what security tools can learn from Duolingo, TikTok, and magic. There's also a twist in Harley's past that explains a lot about his approach to engaging training, but you'll have to listen to find out. New episodes of The Awareness Angle drop every single Monday on YouTube and the podcast platforms, covering real-world scams, cyber culture, and what security looks like from the front lines. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube so you don't miss a thing. And right now, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Harley Sugarman from Anagram Security. Enjoy. Welcome to the Awareness Angle interviews. I am here today with another episode, and today I've got Harley Sugarman from Anagram Security with me. Harley, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. So good to be here.
Good. I've known Harley a couple of years, and Harley's company used to be called Ask Enigma, and they've recently gone through a big rebrand. So I want to talk today about your approach to security awareness training, and then we'll get into your journey here, which is really, really interesting. And we can talk a bit about where we think cyber training and cyber awareness is going over the next few years, which I think would be good.
Perfect. Awesome.
First of all, talk to me about your business, where it comes from, where it's going, what it does, what makes it unique. There's 4 questions there.
Yeah, I can probably get those in one answer. So, I mean, our space, security awareness is a really interesting space. My background is engineering. I had spent a lot of time building software, working on security teams, and awareness was always this sort of black box within security orgs or engineering or security orgs where I worked, meaning it was this thing that we did once a year. We didn't really think about it. We sort of had our tools and we assumed that it kind of didn't work. It was this sort of open secret that of all of the things that we were doing within our security org, this was the one thing that, was really there just to check a box. And at the same time, if you ask most CISOs, I think, what is your biggest risk vector? If you get breached tomorrow, what is going to be the root cause of it? Probably 95 out of 100 of them are going to say, oh, it's going to be, a user. They're going to click on a phishing email. They're going to leave a password, the default password, and someone's going to get in that way. And so for me, this space was really, really interesting because it was both one of the biggest risk vectors that most security orgs faced, but at the same time, the way that we solved this problem was, well, let's just throw 45 minutes worth of training at you every year and hope that you remember it. And so that kind of was, go ahead, yeah.
I mean, that really reflects in the budgets allocated to each thing 100%. As well, doesn't it? Because you'd spend, large companies would spend numbers with many zeros on the end of it for EDR or antivirus or, layered defense, and then trying to get a training tool in or an awareness tool. I've been doing this from when it was a phishing platform, and then it was a training platform, and now it's human risk platforms. But you're struggling to get the investment and the finances to get a decent one of those in, when at the same time you've got your CEO admitting that 95% of the risk sits with the end user.
So I completely agree with you, and I actually have a theory as to why this is, and it kind of ties in a little bit to what our approach is. But if you take a look at the security space sort of broadly, and the way I actually kind of came across this insight was, I went to CISOs and I sort of asked them the question, all right, tomorrow your CFO comes to you and says, you've got to cut your budget by 80%. Really huge amount of capital you've now got to not spend. What do you keep? How do you keep the lights on? And I was wondering if I'd get a lot of different answers or sort of a lot of what the variance would look like. But really, I heard a similar set of things from most CISOs. And they said to me, oh, I would keep my MDR tool, my CrowdStrike, my antivirus software, maybe some of my security operations set up. And if you try to take a step back and look at, well, what are the commonalities within the things that they would keep? They would say it was always focused on detection and response, right? How do I detect that something is wrong? And then how do I respond to that breach or that incident? And if you look at security awareness, pretty much every tool out there, you're not really doing detection and you're not really doing response. What you're doing is compliance box checking. You are, looking at these frameworks like HIPAA, like PCI, like GDPR, and you're saying, all right, it says I need to train my employees annually. Doesn't say what, doesn't say how much, doesn't say how. So I'm just going to do the minimum required thing that I need to do to check that box. And so what that ended up incentivizing was this suite of tools that eventually got very commoditized, that was very dry, very boring, very uninspiring, and didn't actually adhere to how users learn or how behavior change works. Because there's a lot of research on this stuff, just not within the cybersecurity space. And so, CISOs are smart people, they're rational people. If you're faced with spending money on these tools that are going to help you detect and respond, and these tools that are going to just check a box and send videos and multiple choice reading comprehension quizzes to everybody once a year, of course you're going to spend money on the detection and response tools, and you're not going to spend money on the behavior, on the training. And so that was sort of the insight that led into what we're building is, okay, if we were to sort of throw all of the prior art out the window, and if we were to look at how behavior change works, forget security, just generally, what are the things that lead to people forming habits? What are the things that lead to people understanding why something is relevant and important, and how to apply it in their day-to-day? How would training look different? And that is sort of the foundation of what now is Anagram.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. The other thing I think is the thing that I think has been one of the real big reasons that awareness and training hasn't got the focus is metrics as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because with EDR, with with defense and response tools, you can provide a detailed list of all the alerts that you've dealt with. And you can those alerts are probably white noise, a large chunk of them, but you can go, look, this is how many knocks on the door we've had and we haven't let them in. Whereas it's not always been as easy to do with humans, to provide that data. With humans, it was always how many phishing emails got reported and how many phishing emails got clicked and how many users completed your training. But how do you measure actual behavior change? And many vendors out there now claim to be able to measure behavior change, but a lot of them, it's their kind of version of behavior change, or, those metrics, plugging all that in a lot of organizations isn't straightforward. So that's still, again, almost mythological in its, we can do this. And it's like, yeah, but how can you in a large organization, in my organization, can you? That's what's difficult.
So I'll say, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say, I actually think this is one of the things that is a really difficult problem to solve, irrespective of whatever tooling you've got there. The metrics question, I think, is such a good question, because ultimately you've got sort of these two conflicting things where you've got this desire for understanding data and understanding where your who are your risky users and what behavior are they and where is the risk within my organization. And at the same let me start that answer again. I think the problem that I'm just trying to think about the right way to articulate this. So I think the problem that we've got with data in security awareness is that the metrics that we're currently looking at and the metrics that we've been looking at aren't really very good metrics to determine behavior change. You have got click rate, which is better than nothing, but still is a fairly easily gamifiable metric. And I say that meaning I know CISOs who told me this story where they would start the year and have a really difficult phishing simulation. So they knew they would get a high click rate. And then 2 months later, they do a slightly easier one. And then 2 months later, they do a slightly easier one. And you could see the click rate going down. And so at the end of the year, they go to the board and say, hey, look how good a job I did here. Can I have a bonus now, please? And so you're using this data that's kind of easily gamifiable, and it's not very representative of what's actually going on in the real world. And the other problem is with most of these big enterprises, what a risk looks like is fairly unique. So I know companies who have tried to do this with human risk management platforms in the past, and they'll ingest a bunch of data. And the problem is there's so much noise in that data, and it's very difficult from a machine learning perspective or from a data science perspective to build rules around that data that actually give you useful information as an organization. The companies that have done this the most successfully are fortunate enough that they actually have a data science team that they have access to. And, it's usually not a dedicated data science team for security awareness. That's probably not realistic. But if you have someone on your data science team where you can go in and say, hey, you understand what our users look like, you understand what risks we face as company X, and that's going to be different if you're a bank versus if you're a grocery store versus if you're a social media platform. Can you actually use that data and tell us where our risky users are? And so I think that's the only way you can do that successfully. I will also say my sort of controversial opinion here is that 9 out of 10 CISOs know who their riskiest users are. They know who's getting targeted more accurately. They kind of have a gut feel as to who's clicking more or less. Like maybe you'll get a surprise once in a blue moon, but a lot of this stuff actually I think can be intuited. And again, I sort of hate this idea of like, we're going to use data to show you where your human risk lies, because it's sort of showing you the problem, but then not showing you how to solve it. It's like, oh, here's your issue. All right, your job now is to fix it. And that's the point of security awareness as a space, I feel like, has to be to fix the behavior issue and make humans more secure instead of treating them as this risk to be mitigated.
Yes, absolutely. I think what it boils down to is that everyone can have a bad day. Doesn't matter where you are in the business.
Completely.
There definitely are risk profiles, and people who have access to different systems or different data will be a target. I've spoken previously, I've had conversations with a couple of marketers, and they believe marketing departments are a real big target given the amount of access they have and assets they have access to. And typically you'd say your payroll and your finance team would be targets. But everybody and anybody can have a bad day. So anybody with a kind of unique access or access to a network, if we look at recent headline cyber attacks here in the UK, they haven't needed, to compromise someone really, really important in a specific team for a specific reason. They've just needed to get in. And once they've got in, they've wreaked havoc. So they could use pretty much anyone to get in. I think that's, so yeah, there's definitely a benefit to training high risk or people that are vulnerable. But on any day, anyone could be vulnerable. I think that's quite important.
Completely. And it's all about context, right? Like this is where, I know you and I have talked about this idea of nudges a few times. And I think nudges has been sort of co-opted to now mean in our space, we're going to send Slack notifications every week, or we're going to ping you in Teams. And that's not really a nudge. That's, I'm using your words here. That's white noise.
You've outed me.
I'm sorry. It's
true.
Good framing. Go on.
If they're not onboarded properly, if you just start nudging, then it's really easy for that to become white noise. Like I said, it's absolutely.
And that's why I think, as you look at the sort of future state of the industry, and this is where we're going as a product, and I think all products are eventually going to have to converge around this. It is getting those contextual nudges. And this is actually one of the things that AI is very good at, because I'm always a little bit wary of just AI washing all of this tech and say, oh, well, we're going to, I think you're seeing the kind of low-hanging fruit happen right now in our industry where the basics is, okay, the first iteration of AI-powered awareness training is we are going to use AI to generate videos that are custom for you, or we are going to use AI to generate emails. And a bunch of issues, particularly with using AI to generate videos, because it's not good enough. It's people can tell. I think employees are much smarter than most awareness tools give them credit for. And so I feel like these AI kind of Mad Lib style videos are just really bad. But just to bring it back to what you were saying about nudges, I think what AI is really good at is basically pattern matching, right? And saying, okay, given this context, predict the next thing that is going to happen. And so given an email where your bot that actually does come from your boss who's been compromised, but it's coming legitimately from his or her email address. If that email is asking you to go buy 25 gift cards, that's a weird request. And so being able to go and contextually say, hey, this looks like it may actually be from your boss, but the request is a bit weird. Maybe you should double click on it is, I think, the way that nudges have to evolve. And as I say, a fairly rudimentary use case for AI. And it won't be perfect, but I think it'll be a lot more useful than our current approach.
Do you know, I've been saying this, and I've said this on previous podcast episodes when we've looked at phishing emails that have come in from like Amazon or brands like that, and they're landing in Gmail inboxes and Outlook inboxes. And it's really frustrating that companies like Gmail and Outlook, Microsoft, don't do more. They've got all this technology. Both of them have got amazing AI tools. Jury's out, which, some people think Copilot's great, others disagree, but Gemini's, up there. Google invented the tech behind OpenAI and ChatGPT, but still phishing emails that pretend to be from Amazon telling me that I've got a refund or whatever land in an inbox. And it's like, the technology is surely there to prevent this from happening now, because it goes, the content of this email makes it look like it's from Amazon, but it's from a random Gmail account. Our technology tells us that that account doesn't normally send that kind of email, so therefore we're going to mark this or warn the user. But they don't. So you're right. I think AI, the use of AI is, we're only scratching the surface now. And it's true that I did a talk a few weeks ago, and guy from a pen test company said that most AI at the moment is literally if statements. So it's not actually AI, but a lot of the time it's like, if this, then that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's but everyone needs AI washing. It's that we must get our AI on our tool or we'll be left behind.
It's the thing that gives the VCs the kind of warm fuzzies and lets them throw money behind it. But one of our advisors actually, because it is a hard problem. I mean, I will say one of our investors and advisors sort of used this analogy, which I thought was really good. And he basically said, look, for attackers, this explosion of AI tooling is like a machine gun. And for the defenders, it's like you're giving them a wooden club. And it is a much harder problem to solve on the defensive side than it is on the offensive side. So I mean, yes, could Google and Gmail and Outlook and Microsoft be doing more? Probably. Are they looking into it? Almost certainly. It's the challenge is that now all of a sudden the level of sophistication behind these attacks and the ease of use of being able to launch these kinds of sophisticated attacks has just skyrocketed. Like, the barrier to entry has dropped massively. Now I can send via an attacker, I can send 2,000 personalized phishing emails that draw in information that they can scrape from my LinkedIn or from your LinkedIn, localized in my language. And I can send 2,000 of those that are all unique, and it takes me the click of a button and a language model. That's a scary thought. And we're only seeing the beginnings of it. If you look at some of the risk reports that are coming out, like 3 years ago, something like 1 to 2% of phishing attacks were AI generated. Last year, it was 4 to 5%. I think this last year's now, its most recent numbers I remember seeing were 8-9%. And you're just going to see that go up and up until it sort of becomes the predominant way of doing it. And that's very difficult. Like, if you are building software to detect what do these attacks look like, it's tricky. And it's not just Google and Microsoft, it's all the companies who are making the email security software have to figure out how to incorporate this. It's a really difficult problem to solve. And so I think, again, as we think about the human element, right? What does this mean? It means that this stuff is going to land in the inbox with increasing frequency. So you have to now rely on the humans to be the ones spotting it or not acting on it. And for me, I think that's what when we talk about metrics in security awareness, that's what you want to be measuring, is how, not just how many times are these things happening, but how many times are these things appearing and then not happening, right? How many times are we nudging the user to say, hey, this looks suspicious, and then they actually act on that nudge? And I think that's, as I say, I think that's the direction that the industry will go. But we've got a little bit of a way to go there until the technology is there on the defensive side.
I think essentially what you're saying is the attackers have got these AI powered machine guns, and we've got wooden clubs as defenders, right? So, but each wooden club only works with each individual type of bullet, and every time they fire, they're firing a different type of bullet. So we've got to identify, there's a million different types of stuff coming in, and we've got to identify. So we are playing catch up because we're working retro. We're being responsive rather than, defending before it happens. This means fundamentally that the focus does have to move from systems to defend, and not completely. There's still I'm not saying there's no place for EDR or anything like that, but essentially what we're saying is the investment should start shifting, or at least level up, from defending your devices to maybe building some defense in your people, which has always been massively underinvested. I haven't got any stats, but if you look at cybersecurity budgets, they will be largely those tools to stop people breaking in will be right up here. Yeah. And the human platforms will be right down here. So how do we make end users more aware? What are you doing that is different that helps end users be more aware and think about it?
So the first thing that where we started as a product was really taking the technology and the techniques around behavior change, the things that lead people to pay attention to training, and baking that into our product, right? If you look at a lot of the existing training out there, it follows this format that has basically existed since the beginning of awareness training and hasn't really changed, which is, here is some out-of-the-box content followed by some sort of reading comprehension style questions based on what you just read or what you just watched. And most employees don't find a ton of value in that. They put it on their second monitor, they mute the video, and then if they're allowed to, and then they let it play, and then they, kind of answer the common sense questions. And that doesn't work, right? Like if we educated school kids the way that we expect adults to be educated in security awareness, within 3 weeks, there would be riots, there would be protests. Like, we can't teach our kids this way. And so why do we expect it to work with adults in security awareness education? And that leads to why there's no budget allocated here, because the training doesn't work. And so why would I spend money on something that doesn't work? I just need to do it. So we started really first looking at companies like Duolingo, the language learning app, and TikTok, and these companies that were really good at engaging users and keeping them, keeping their attention. And then the other place we looked actually comes from the security world, which is this culture of capture the flag. So within security, there is this, CCF, capture the flag culture of, hey, we are going to give you security engineer X a piece of code with a vulnerability baked into it. And your job is to figure out how to exploit that vulnerability. And you have to think critically, and you have to sort of play around with it, experiment, figure out how you would attack it, and see if you can break in and find a piece of text, a flag in this software. And it works really well. People love it. They love kind of getting into the mindset of the attacker, thinking about, okay, well, how would I break this? And we took these lessons that really have existed for years and years outside of security awareness, and we applied them into our training. And what that looks like is very, very short videos. Everything in our platform is less than 60 seconds long, followed by very, very sort of interactive and engaging puzzles that often will require some sort of mindset shift where the user is thinking like an attacker to craft a phishing email or something like that. And we tie that into the training, and then we also make it very easy to customize. So we let companies go in and explain why their users should care. So this is not just, hey, here's our annual training course, deploy it, and you're set. This is explain why within your company a user needs to care about this. What are the real world consequences? And then we let them deploy it in a little bit more of a targeted way. So the kinds of attacks that an engineer sees and the kind of attacks that someone on the sales team or someone on the legal team sees are very different. So letting them decide, all right, I want my sales team to understand X, Y, and Z. I want my legal team to understand A, B, and C. Letting them go in and customize that just one level deeper. These are very, very basic things that we can do to make training more effective. And we're not even talking about, kind of the contextual nudges, which is what we're launching in the second half of this year. But even taking those small steps and just looking at the science of behavior change and critical thinking and how people learn, you see a ton of difference. And so we see within the companies that we go into their phishing click rate, which is, as I say, not my favorite metric, but is the one metric that you can consistently rely on is being gathered in some way, shape, or form. We see that drop really, really dramatically within 6 months. We see the incidences of data sharing drop. And again, this is another thing that we try and do that's a little different is we try and work with the security operations team and understand, how are you tracking these things? Can we pull in this data and can we show that, after introducing X, you see Y? We'll help them run A/B tests where they have a placebo group and our group. And there's just a lot of data behind it, but you kind of have to be manual about it.
I kind of feel like that's quite unique. In my experience, that kind of hand-holding and support, you're not just dropping off some training and then going away and then touching base to make sure you're going to renew in a year. Do you know what I mean? There is very much it seems like you're very much invested in this being a success and continuing to bring around actual change, which I think is, in my experience, is quite unique in our space. So that's really, really good. The other thing I think from that training, I was very much of a mindset that moving training to more of a compliance tool rather than a behavioral change tool. And mainly because the minute you mention training, it's draining. People disengage. The minute you mention it's mandatory, people are like, oh, it's mandatory. Like you say, set a monitor behind the browser, just get through it as much as possible, have a few guesses at the answer. The training you're talking about, not only does it kind of pull someone in and perhaps talk to them about stuff that actually is relevant, but you're asking them to use parts of their brain in a way that they wouldn't if they were just watching a video or answering an assessment. Because it's interactive, that's actually using different parts of their brain and it's making them think. Which, I mean, I'm no scientist, but for me, that would make it more engaging, which means they're more likely to remember that experience and take something away from it. I guess that's part of the reason you do it like that.
Yeah, and this is not us reinventing the wheel here, right? Like, this is us building on the shoulders of these companies, not in security awareness, that have nailed that cycle of critical thinking followed by feedback, right? Duolingo is one example, but like there are a million different educational companies out there that have really done a ton of research on the end user and understanding what makes them think, what makes them engaged, what makes them care about this stuff. And those are the lessons that we're drawing from. And it's not rocket science. Like, a lot of this stuff is fairly obvious when you say it, but there's not up to this point been the incentive to look at it that way, because people are just checking the box.
Yeah.
And, one thing actually that I've actually fairly recently come to this conclusion, which I think is, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I'm going to assume that it is. All of these compliance frameworks, if you look at how they have written, we need you to train your employees annually, they are incredibly vague, right? Like, they will say, we need you to do annual training on security relevant to their job function. And that's probably, you're gone?
No, I used to have to provide evidence for SOC 2, and it was literally, do you provide annual awareness training? can you provide me with the completion stats for these individuals and a sample of individuals? And then the last time I touched it was probably a year ago, and I was asked, do you simulate phishing? Can you provide me an example? And that was it. So there was no measure of how impactful the training was. The training could have been one slide going, be secure. Click yes to say you'll be secure. There was no measure of how impactful, what behaviors it was changing. And the same with the phishing as well. It was like, do you fish? Can you provide some evidence of people that have been fished? But again, no measure of how good the phishing was, how realistic, how tough. See, as far as a compliance, and I argued this so often I was like, can we change? Have users been trained? Can we change that wording? Are you engaging with users? Will engagement work as a training metric? Like, I have sent them this many communications over the past year and they've read them or they've opened them and clicked on them. Therefore, they're engaging, because that brings around better behavior change than one piece of training. But
Completely.
Like you say, the compliance standards are incredibly vague when it comes to training.
So here's my controversial opinion. I actually think that it's good that they're so vague, because what good training looks like is not one size fits all, right? Like, what good training looks like at company X and company Y could be very, very different. And maybe for certain, I'll give you an example, actually. So we work with a few manufacturing companies, and they've got, workers on the line who don't even have a laptop. They might have a shared workstation and then their smartphone that they use for personal, their personal device. And then they've got the people who are, writing the algorithms that go into the software, that go into the machines that they're working on. And so massively different job responsibilities, massively different risk profiles. And what training for, person one versus person two looks like might not be the same, probably shouldn't be the same. And so I think in a lot of ways, the fact that this stuff is vague is good, because it gives us the ability to define what good looks like in each of these different cases. And it shouldn't really be for these standards bodies to define what good looks like, because they don't know. Like, they haven't got the level of expertise in each of these industries to understand. So they should just be sort of looking for the lowest common denominator. I think the problem is the way we've all interpreted it is, well, okay, you have to train your employees annually. We're going to send them 45 minutes of videos and quizzes annually. And that's obviously completely wrong. So I think that there is this shift where it's not necessarily, in my opinion, the standards body's job to figure out the right way to train your users. They should ensure that you're doing something, but actually it's really the companies themselves, the CISO and then the awareness teams, it's their job to figure out, okay, who are my users? Are they working in the shop? Are they writing animations? Are they cooking, behind the counter? And what are the risks? Or are they processing credit card information? And how do we then build training that addresses those risks specifically?
I've had a couple of conversations with people where I've compared the security awareness industry to health and safety, and where perhaps the health and safety industry was 20 years ago, for example.
Yeah.
And how things have changed. And I'm pretty sure I heard someone say or saw something where it took it was on a webinar I was on, actually, and I made this comparison. And someone said it took a couple of CEOs to go to jail for things to, like, all of a sudden change. And I think what we're seeing with, like, DORA legislation that's come in and stuff like that is that all of a sudden now there is a responsibility on boards for cybersecurity, more so than there's ever been, that could actually result in criminal charges against a board member if certain standards and certain controls aren't implemented. So I think we will I hope that we'll start seeing a shift where it is given more focus. But I really like your take. I don't think your take around how obscure the compliance ask is around training. I don't think that's controversial. I think that's enlightened, actually. Like, for me, that's changed I'd never thought of it like that. But actually it makes sense, right? Because what is a risk to one company might not be a risk to another company. Someone on the line producing stuff has a very, very much a much lighter risk profile than someone working in finance or someone administering a whole computer network. Very different risk profiles. So by keeping it very, very, non-specific does quite help in some ways. I like that. I think that's really good.
And the other piece there, which again, this is sort of occurring to me as I'm saying it, but it does actually make good economic and business sense as well, because what you need to, especially if you look at, I'm using factory as an example here, but I think this applies across the board. You probably don't need to give an hour's worth of training to every single factory line worker. Health and safety, you probably do, just in the way that you probably don't need to give an hour of health and safety training to someone who's sitting behind a desk and working all day, right? And if you look at it economically, especially within factories, a lot of them tend to be hourly workers. And so if you can drop that training from an hour to 15 minutes and it's relevant to what they like, to what they see, so they'll actually care about it a bit more. Say, if 45 minutes times 1,000 employees is 5,000 minutes, right? All of a sudden, that's meaningful budget. I think that you can make a really compelling economic case for this as well, beyond just the fact that I think this is, beyond an efficacy case. I think you can start thinking about this in terms of ROI.
So let's bring it back to Anagram.
Yes.
I'm keen to find out. So when we first started talking, it was Ask Enigma. Cypher's in there somewhere as well. What's the journey? What's the journey looked like?
Yeah. So the story of the company is funny. As I say, my background is engineering. I was a full stack engineer for a long time, a security engineer for a while. And the place that I originally felt like there was an opportunity was really around training of security talent. So helping companies go in and make the most of their existing security team, helping them train from within. I think that I still think that there is a lot of gatekeeping done in the security industry, where you need a bunch of certifications that don't really mean anything, or you need to have gone to school for a certain course of study. And the initial insight that kind of formed the company was, okay, how do we help companies make the most of the talent that they have and find new talent irrespective of that talent's background? And it used this idea of puzzles from the jump. So the way that we did that training and evaluation was through these little interactive hands-on exercises, similar to Capture the Flag. And what we found, we launched this probably 2022, 2023. What we found was just, being very candid, that security teams weren't that big. And we launched into a world where a lot of companies were belt tightening and a lot of companies were doing layoffs and they weren't hiring very many people. And so we didn't think the market was big enough, candidly. As we went to different companies who we were working with, and we sort of said, well, okay, it seems like there's going to be a cap to how useful you're going to find this. We started asking them, well, where do you see value in what we've built outside of obviously, training the team? And it was one of the CISOs that we worked with, one of our customers said like, hey, this is really interesting. People love doing this. Like, could you look at this for general awareness training? And, I was a bit skeptical initially because of everything we've talked about. I just felt like this space had been commoditized. There was no real world where you could actually change behavior. But then we had that conversation as a team where we sort of said, oh, you know what? People really enjoy this. This adheres to a lot of the science of behavior change. Let's see if this would actually make a difference. And so we built a first version of it very quickly. We launched it with one of our customers, and we saw really good behavior change data very quickly in a way that I was completely candidly shocked by. Like, I did not think it would work, at least as well as it did. And so we then, we sort of had this data, and we had this customer who was, really impressed with us and started telling their friends. So all of a sudden, we then kind of realized, oh, you know what? Like, this works. Every company needs awareness training. So the market size was a lot bigger. And then we kind of went off to the races. So this was a little over a year ago that we kind of made the decision to fully focus on what is now Anagram. But yeah, the journey was a weird one. I stand by the first product we built. I think it's a great product. I think that, one day it will it could see the light of day again, but I also had to do the right thing in terms of building a business and honestly, this is a more exciting problem for me to work on. I love this problem. I think if we can solve this problem, we are addressing one of the biggest greenfield opportunities in security right now. So it was a little bit of a roundabout journey. Go ahead.
I love the fact that you've come into, as someone that's been in the security awareness industry for 10 years, you've come into what I would call quite a crowded market, but you've still managed to find something that's unique and different. Like you're not another company. Like you have got a unique twist on this, and it's one that you're saying has proven to be different, and it's almost like too obvious. The other companies are doing what they're doing because there's a set mold or a set model, and everyone's doing rinse and repeating. And it has seemed that over the last few years, when I remember when everyone had a phishing platform, and you had a phishing platform, and you showed some training videos. And then all the phishing platforms got bought up by the big companies. Mm-hmm. And then people started doing human risk programs, and some of those got bought up by the big companies. But now everyone's a human risk platform, that taps into way more. But, the training is still pretty much the training. It's, there's not been any evolutions in the way we're identifying the human risks now. But has anyone really taken a step back and looked at how we bring about that change? Some vendors do some really nice looking videos and stuff, and I've made really nice videos, but it runs deeper than that if you want to bring around actual change. And I haven't spoken to anyone that's doing it differently, which is essentially the combination that you guys are bringing is different, which I think is great.
I think that one of my least favorite things about our industry is the phrase human risk management. I know that popped up like 4 years ago, and that was that's kind of the buzzword, and Gartner now has the quadrant around it and all of that.
Yeah.
I think it's probably one of the most, not going to say one of the most damaging things, but, incredibly damaging because it frames it exactly wrong. And this is why I say I actually think this space is really ripe for opportunity and greenfield expansion, because the framing of human risk management is humans are a risk that we need to mitigate, and they are going to be a problem, and we don't have any other option except to, make their lives as either as difficult as possible, or just treat them as though they are going to be this inevitable, hole that's going to be exploited. And as long as you look at it in that lens, then the training and the behavior change does take a backseat, because it's in the name, human risk management. It's humans are the risk to be mitigated. And what does that mean? Okay, we're going to pull in data sources. We're going to figure out where your risky users are, and maybe we'll give them targeted training. But as you say, the training kind of still looks the same. And you're not looking at detection. You're not looking at response. You're sort of looking at detection in the sense that you're sort of understanding who are your risky users. But as I say, people kind of know who their risky users are anyway. Like, you're not detecting active breaches, and you're not training your employees to actively detect breaches. So I think you have to look at this from a behavior change lens first. And if you don't, you've lost before you've even started the race, because you're incentivized to solve the wrong problem. You have to look what I've been calling human-driven security. So making humans the proactive line of defense, as opposed to treating them as this risk to be mitigated. So I could get on the soapbox and talk about why I hate HRM for a while. It's in my mind a blessing, because I think it gives us a competitive edge. And as long as no one else is thinking about this, if any of them are watching this podcast, I guess they'll be thinking about this. But as long as no one else is looking at it through this lens, then, fine. I think we have a little bit of an edge, but it has to change. Otherwise, we're just going to be in this situation where the training stays rubbish. The training doesn't change behavior, and you just sort of get into a vicious circle.
I think it is really telling that, and again, I've no evidence of this, but platforms that look at the actions users take and then think telling them that action was bad is going to actually drive the behavior change. Because we've spoken before, unless users are really, really engaged with giving monkeys, then they won't care, because they don't know why to care. So if we actually forget, for me, like that level of human risk, like user performs oopsie, tell user they've performed an oopsie. That's not going to make a change. And in some cases that could build resentment, and that's where the white noise comes from as well. Because if a process exists that is inherently risky, but that process is the way things are done, they're going to learn to block out that noise. And if they learn to block out that noise, they'll block out the next noise and the next noise. Whereas if we can actually, in a conversation we had previously, a couple of conversations on this podcast, actually, we've spoken about, how we get back to the primal kind of fight or flight, the primal instincts, and had a conversation around how stress can change the way we act. But essentially, you want to change the instinct of people to actually be secure. So when that white noise is coming, going, oh, you've just performed it and it's process related, you want to train the user or make the user aware before they engage with that process, that process is risky. So you want the user to go, I'm not comfortable following this process that has been the way things have been done forever. Is there a better way? And it's through behavioral change and through really going back to the core and trying to change I say user, I should stop saying user, trying to change the people, trying to change the human. That's when we can actually bring real change, I think, not just responding to an action. We need to go back a step, which is exactly what you're saying. We need to reprogram each individual's kernel, each individual source code is essentially what we need to reprogram, because everybody is different as well. And it's, we all started off with the same source code, but then it's been built on. So there's a million different operating systems, billions of different operating systems running out there. And one size definitely doesn't fit all, as we've said.
I completely agree with all of that. But yeah, that was well said.
Just there's one thing I want to ask. I used to be the journey to security and the journey to awareness. The people that work in this industry, they've all come from various different places. I've spoken to a couple of people who had done acting classes. I've spoken to someone who was, I think, a singer and a musician. I was a holiday camp entertainer. Harley, where did you go back before you were a security engineer, before you were, any of that? What were you?
I was a magician. Yeah, this is my I guess not so embarrassing secret past anymore.
There is nothing embarrassing about this. It's awesome. Go on.
So when I was very young when I got into magic. I was probably 8 or 9, and that was sort of the thing that I did in school, and then when I was sort of working part-time, those were my jobs. Instead of working at the shop, I did weddings and bar mitzvahs. I did magic. And, and I never made it really professional, but I sort of would say I touched the world of semi-professional for a while. And yeah, I love it. And I think that, to your point, having a more wide-ranging set of backgrounds, especially in security awareness, is massively valuable, because this is the one part of security that everybody knows, right? This is, if you talk to 95% of employees at a company and you ask, what does your security team do? Tangibly, this is the one thing that they probably can all say, oh yeah, they give me that rubbish training every year, right? So this is the most visible thing that they do, pretty much any security team does. And so they should treat it as brand building as opposed to brand destroying. And the companies that do it best, I often find, have these awareness leads who come from that unusual background, marketing or entertainment, or, I haven't met another magician yet, but one day I'm sure I will.
No, there is an element of performance with it, though, isn't there? And this is where I think magic leans into it, because there's an element of storytelling and there's an element of performance. And I think if you bring that to your tooling, that's what makes it different, because you aren't just expecting someone to consume. It's more than just a good video. It's that whole experience. And I guess, I'm not a magician, but I guess that there's a whole, you've got to get the people to believe what you're doing. Obviously magic is real. I didn't mean that, but you've got to get people, you've got to buy them into into the story, and you bring them along on a journey, don't you? And that's exactly what we're doing with behavioral change and training.
I think that is right. The idea of this is a journey. You have to get people bought in, answer the why do I care about this? If you read a lot of magic theory, one of the things that they talk about is magic is in a lot of ways storytelling. It's the same thing as being an actor. The difference and what makes magic magic is that you are telling a story, and the audience expects the story to end one way and it ends another way, and that shift in the ending is where the magic comes in, right? And there are some
Where the
parallels
magic
there.
happens.
Exactly, right? It's that moment of like, I thought this was going to happen, but this happened, or this should have happened, but this happened instead. And, in security, there's actually a lot of parallels to that, right? Like you are expecting a certain set of things to happen. If you're an attacker, you are exploiting the fact that people expect A to lead to B, and you're sort of redirecting A to lead to C instead of leading to B. So there are actually a lot of parallels, but I think if you understand that journey, if you understand storytelling, you inherently understand security awareness a little bit better, because you have to answer the question, why do I care about this? Why is this important to me? What is the investment that I have, whether it's emotional or financial or something else? And you play all those things together to tell a story that leads someone to say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to change my outlook on this, whether it's, oh, wow, magic is real, which obviously it is, or, I'm not going to click on this phishing email. Like very different end states, quite similar journeys in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. Couple more questions. What's a security? You said you could have human risk management for that. I was going to mention this earlier. A security buzzword that you'd love to ban forever.
Oh man, okay. I mean, human risk management is definitely top. What other ones? I mean, I would love there to be better distinction between an MSP and an MSSP. I genuinely think I understand the difference, but I've been in this industry now for like multiple years, and I'm slightly confused. I feel like they could have chosen better, more distinctive acronyms than just adding an S.
Does it depend? They can identify as what they like given any different day? Or?
I think one of them basically sells software to so it acts as a reseller of software to security orgs, and then one of them can resell software but also can offer services. So they might have like outsourced security operations or something like that. I don't quote me on that. I feel like someone's security is going to watch this and be like, you absolute moron. How have you worked in the industry for this long and not know that? But I blame the confusingness of the acronyms.
There's too many acronyms. Too many everywhere.
There are too many acronyms. Yeah, the alphabet soup of security. Similar. Actually, no. I know. You know what term I would get rid of? Quishing. In fact, any of the ishings. Like, end users don't give a shit. I hate. Phishing is bad enough, but we don't need vishing, smishing, quishing. Like, just tell them what it is.
Way back on an early episode, I remember we were talking about WhatsApp phishing, and I was like, is this now called wishing? And then could we work out an alphabet of phishing?
Yeah, Signal is phishing. Oh, God.
Phishing, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you could, probably. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Let's get rid of all the ishings. Because, and this is it's really obvious, actually, as someone whose last episode before recording this featured the word voice phishing in the title, we didn't use phishing. And I've kind of only just realized that. Part of our job is explaining stuff simply so everybody can understand. And I always say this, I use my mum as a measure on this. If I was to start talking to my mum about quishing, vishing, wishing, and, rishing, she'd have no idea what I was talking about. But it's all phishing, just a different delivery mechanism. It's all essentially phishing. And I think a lot of the AI threats that we see day to day now are essentially just new AI generated versions of the same attacks we've had for the last 15, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
A phishing email is still a phishing email. It doesn't matter if it's been generated by AI. Voice calls, yes, all right, it might be now deep faking someone's actual voice, but what's to stop me phoning and saying that I'm a police officer or a solicitor representing that person? There was a film recently called Thelma that was about an elderly lady who fell for a voice scam and gave some money, and then she races across town on a mobility scooter to get the money back off the attacker. It's quite a funny little independent film, quite funny. But that didn't use any fakery. It was literally just the old confidence trick. And that's these are just new spins on the same old scam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last question today. What's something you wish more CISOs or vendors understood about human risk or understood about communicating human risk? Is there one thing that you wish CISOs would get a grasp of or change?
I mean, I think looking at things through a behavior change lens is probably the biggest mindset shift that needs to happen. And not just looking at, oh, we're going to put AI into these tools and call that innovation, right? I think it's so easy to say, oh, we're doing AI generated videos right now. How innovative is that? Where you're not addressing the core risk. And the way that you address the core risk is you look at behavior change. One thing I want to do as just like an open source thing is, all these companies that are now selling, AI generated, awareness videos. You can just go to synthesia.com, pay $30 a month for a, pro account for a month, type in, hey, I want a security awareness video on this topic, and it'll give you one. And you don't need, if you want to do that, and I have a whole bunch of issues with people who do that anyway, because I think it doesn't work as well. Like, do that. You don't need to just throw AI into all these tools that are basically just wrappers around these foundational models and these foundational tools and call that innovation. I think you have to take that step back and look at it from a risk management perspective, or from a behavior change perspective.
I see this on LinkedIn quite a lot. So what I see on LinkedIn quite a lot is AI generated images where people have got a nice post, and because posts with images perform better on LinkedIn now, people go to generate an AI image. And I almost did this recently, but I generated the image and everything. And I was like, no, because it annoys me because you could always tell it's an AI generated image. Obviously these tools are going to get better, but I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I just posted a picture of my cat instead, and said, like, owned it and was like, I'm posting a picture of my cat because I don't want to post an AI image. I've seen there is a place for AI generated content, and I've seen one vendor who have made some, I was sent some, I think it was like early preview AI generated video that they'd made, and it looked good.
Oh, cool.
But 99% of AI generated video doesn't look good. I think that's we spend so busy at Jurassic Park, we're so busy wondering if we could that we don't actually stop to think if we should. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because would you actually sit there, and a content creator said this, would you actually be entertained by your own content that you're making? And that's the test, isn't it? You make it and you think it's great because you can make it and it's amazing because it's AI. But would you actually enjoy watching it? That's the difference, I think.
Completely.
Not everyone realizes that. Would you enjoy and learn from your training?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Our training. I mean, I think the answer is yes. I mean, I have taken it now probably 10,000 times on various demo calls and sales, but that was the inspiration for the company. I built the training I wish I'd had. And, we do it for general awareness. We do it for developers as well. We didn't get to talk about developer training at all. I think that has a whole host of its own issues, but I think the mark of a good company and the mark of a good founder is you build the tool that you wish you had. And so for me, if I think about all the training I've done at different companies throughout my life, what do I wish it looked like? What do I wish it had felt like? That's kind of what we ended up building. So I think, yes, I do.
Just before we go, is there one thing to recommend? Book, CD, film, TV series? Doesn't have to be cyber security related. If you could, what would you recommend to someone if I bumped into you in the street and said, recommend me something, Harley?
Okay, man, two things. Security awareness related, there's a book called Nudge. Very interesting, all about behavioral science, not about security at all. You might have it.
I don't think I have it here, actually. I've heard of it, but I think I'm missing that one.
It's very good. It's not really about security. It's about all these other examples of cities and organizations sort of building in behavioral change to the flows that their population or their employees had to deal with, and just really, really interesting scientific way of looking at it. Non-security related, I've been watching, if you're okay with a little bit of sort of viscera, I've been watching a show called The Pit, which is like a medical show on HBO.
I've heard of this. It's like the dirty newborn version of ER, isn't it?
That is what I've never watched ER, but that is what I have been told. It's very good. It's quite gory, but if you're okay with that, it's very, very good. Characters are amazing. It's got the same guy, I think, from ER in it. My wife will kill me if I get this wrong. I'm pretty sure that's right.
No, it is Noah Wiley.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I know very.
I think it was originally pitched as a sequel to ER, but then the stars didn't align, so it went elsewhere and ended up being repositioned as a non-sequel to ER or something.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
I've heard it's meant to be good. Yeah, I've heard it's meant to be very good, but I haven't got around to watching it yet. Okay, brilliant. Lovely. Right, Harley, thank you so much for joining me. We'll happily have you back. Maybe we'll get you back in the future and talk about developer training, because we didn't even touch on that today.
Oh, always happy.
That'd be good. Brilliant.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Before we go, sorry, completely forgot. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is anagramsecurity.com. That is probably the best place. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you work in security awareness, I'll probably just accept it. I always love talking to others and seeing what other people are writing and talking about. So find me on LinkedIn or the company, obviously. And then our website is anagramsecurity.com.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Harley. We'll speak soon.
Brilliant.
See ya.
See ya.